The story of Fyodor Mikhailovich is not one of patriotic heroism, but of cold, calculated betrayal forged in the crucible of a failed invasion. The world watched as the infamous 40-mile convoy of Russian armor, like a steel serpent, meant to strangle. Kyiv stalled and became a sitting duck, a symbol of staggering logistical failure. Fyodor was a cog in that broken machine, a junior communications officer from Moscow, a man whose life had been unremarkable until history thrust him into its grinder. His unit, equipped with an advanced electronic warfare vehicle, found itself mired in a field, out of fuel, and utterly exposed. The constant, unnerving buzz of Ukrainian reconnaissance drones was the soundtrack to their impending doom. When the strike came, it was not a direct hit, but a near miss that was somehow worse. The concussive force of the mortar shell liquefied the earth around their ditch and turned their vehicle into a shrapnel storm. Fyodor remembered the sensation of being thrown, then the suffocating weight of mud and debris. When consciousness returned, it was to a world of silence, broken only by the crackle of fire and the drip of water or something else. He was the only one moving, the only one breathing amidst the twisted, still warm remains of his comrades. It was in this moment, caked in the mud and viscera of the men he had eaten with hours before, that the soldier died and the spy was born. Survival required not just luck, but a radical, ruthless shift in identity. His salvation was his secret weapon, a flawless, idiomatic command of Ukrainian. It was a gift from his maternal grandmother, a native of Kyiv, a woman who had filled his childhood summers with the sounds of the language. The stories of the city and the subtle inflections that distinguished a true local from an outsider. As the invasion's initial chaos created a flood of displaced and desperate people, Fyodor shed his uniform, becoming just another traumatized refugee fleeing the fighting. He used his language as a perfect camouflage. His story of being a shell-shocked civilian from a bombed-out village in the north, holding firm amidst the tidal wave of human misery. The journey to Kyiv was a harrowing odyssey of checkpoints and suspicion. But in those early days, when the fabric of society was stretched thin, his performance was impeccable. He was a survivor, wounded and dazed, seeking the ultimate sanctuary, the apartment of his relatives in the Obolin district. The weeks of recovery in that safe apartment were a descent into a different kind of battle. The shock of his near-death experience curdled into a cold resolve. He watched Ukrainian television, saw the reports of the Russian retreat from the north, and interpreted it not as the failure of his commanders, but as a personal humiliation that demanded a response. The comfortable, familiar surroundings of his family's home became a cage. He saw his Ukrainian relatives not as saviors, but as part of the enemy ecosystem that had destroyed his unit. The patriot, or perhaps the narcissist, within him awakened. He made contact using a complex, multi-layered encryption method, a fallback protocol known only to a select few communications officers. He reached out to a sleeper cell of Russian handlers operating deep within Kyiv. His value was immediately apparent. A trained soldier with specific technical knowledge, now an invisible man embedded behind enemy lines with a perfect blood-verified cover. The GRU, Russia's military intelligence, had just acquired its most valuable asset in the heart of the enemy capital. Thus began Fyodor's 2-year reign as one of the most covert and valuable asset of Russian military machine. He became a meticulous archivist of vulnerability. His civilian status granted him unimpeded movement. He purchased a used, inconspicuous sedan and became a phantom, mapping the city's defenses and its lifeblood with the dispassionate eye of a surgeon. He wasn't just photographing military checkpoints, he was identifying the very sinews of urban existence. He documented the structural weaknesses of power substations, noting where a precise strike could cause a cascade failure. He timed the shift changes at key government buildings, identifying the moments of maximum occupancy. He used his old army expertise to map the signal footprints of communication hubs, and even provided detailed layouts of nuclear research centers, calculating the profound psychological terror their strike would induce. But Fyodor's true insidiousness lay in his deeper, more cynical understanding of societal morale. He reported on the queues outside a popular bakery in the Padil district, noting the time of day when the line was longest, filled with elderly residents. He observed the crowds at the Dorohozichi metro station, used as a nightly bomb shelter, documenting the flow of people. He reported on the parking patterns at a television tower that broadcasted messages of unity and resistance, understanding that destroying the symbol was as important as destroying the function. The aftermath of his intelligence was written in fire, rubble, and the silent trauma of a city under siege. Consider 5 sites forever scarred, known to have been targeted based on Führer's meticulous reports. The central heating plant explosions. His report went beyond photography. He had spent days observing, noting the isolated transformers that were vulnerable from the north, the lack of anti-drone netting, and the single access road that would hamper firefighter response. The strike, a coordinated volley of Shahed drones on a freezing January night, was catastrophic. It didn't just damage the facility. It plunged entire districts into a primordial darkness and cold. The aftermath was a public health crisis. Pipes burst in aging apartments, and the elderly, whom Führer had so clinically observed, began to die not from bombs, but from hypothermia, a slow, quiet massacre engineered from his notes. The vehicle registration office on Brovary Avenue. To any observer, it was a place of mundane bureaucracy. But Führer's military eye had detected the discrete increase in military-grade vehicles using the rear courtyard at night. His report highlighted the office's dual use as a hidden logistics depot for rotating frontline units. The precision strike, a pair of Russian Iskander missiles, was aimed at the courtyard. The aftermath was a scene of horrific juxtaposition. The vaporized remains of military trucks mingled with the shredded paperwork of civilian car registrations. The message was brutal. Nowhere, not even the most mundane corner of life, was safe from the war Fyodor was helping to wage. The attack on Art Arsenal Cultural Center within the Kyiv Monastery complex. This target was a pure psychological strike to the public. Fyodor had attended an exhibition there, noting how it had been repurposed as a hub for morale-boosting concerts for soldiers on leave and art therapy for traumatized children. His report described it not as a building, but as a nexus of propagandistic spirit. The missile strike, which miraculously spared the ancient monastery itself but reduced the modern center to a smoldering crater of twisted steel and shattered artwork, was an attack on the soul of the city's defiance. The aftermath was a profound citywide grief, a palpable loss of a sanctuary that represented resilience and beauty in the face of terror. The Institute of Nuclear Research. This was Fyodor's most audacious assignment. Using his old army credentials, he posed as a journalist writing about scientific perseverance. His diagrams of access roads, perimeter security, and even the ventilation systems for the non-reactor laboratories were terrifyingly detailed. The subsequent drone attack, while causing minimal radiological release thanks to robust safety protocols, achieved its true goal. The aftermath was international panic. Headlines screamed about a nuclear incident in Kyiv. The strike demonstrated Russia's willingness to dance on the precipice of catastrophe, a shadow game of brinkmanship enabled by Fyodor's inside knowledge. The Civil Defense Department on Shevchenko Boulevard, this was his masterpiece, the operation that would ultimately entrap him. He had circled the building for days, using a small custom-built signal jammer concealed in his backpack to briefly disrupt local communications during a peak operational hour. His report confirmed the exact frequencies used in the building, vulnerability to electronic warfare immediately preceding a kinetic strike. The subsequent airstrike was devastating, crippling a key node of Ukraine's emergency response coordination. The aftermath was chaos. Ambulances, fire trucks, and rescue units were left directionless for critical hours following other strikes, amplifying the death toll citywide. For 2 years, Fyodor operated with the arrogance of a man who believed he was a ghost, waging his own private war. But his downfall was a product of that very arrogance. In late 2024, a dedicated cell of Ukrainian counterintelligence, painstakingly reviewing thousands of hours of traffic camera footage from the days preceding the civil defense strike, noticed the pattern. A single vehicle, a common gray Lada sedan, appeared on multiple cameras, slowly, methodically circling the target zone on 3 separate occasions. It was Fyodor conducting his final, fatal reconnaissance. He had become a creature of habit, convinced of his own invincibility, and habit is the ultimate death of a spy. His capture was swift and brutal. SBU agents stormed his downtown apartment at dawn, finding him at his computer, mid-transmission. But the punishment was designed to be collective and to send an unmistakable message, in a stark warning to any who would betray the nation from within. Every male member of his Kyiv family uncles, cousins who had unknowingly sheltered him, were arrested as co-conspirators. Their lives, built over generations in the city, were shattered by the actions of their relative, a chilling demonstration that treachery has a long and destructive shadow. At his trial, Fyodor was impassive, a man who had long since retreated behind a wall of ideological certainty. He was handed a life sentence to be served in a harsh labor camp, a fate many would argue is worse than the death penalty typically reserved for traitors. But the Ukrainian military intelligence services were thinking strategically. A dead spy tells no tales. A dead spy cannot be bartered. Fyodor, alive in a cold prison cell, is a treasure trove of counterintelligence. He is the key to unlocking the entire network of handlers, dead drops, communication methods, financial pipelines, and the very architecture of the enemy apparatus that placed him there. But the chilling echo of his betrayal, written in the scars across the city and the broken lives of his own family, will linger for a generation, a permanent lesson in the quiet, insidious cost of a war fought not just on the front lines, but in the heart of the home itself.